Hello and welcome back to the Academy of Worship podcast. This is the podcast for, what are we in? March.
Yeah.
Because we completely skipped February.
Doesn't count. It has less days than everything else.
Right. It was leap year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so
came
I
close,
think
but
they gave us an extra day to
we
do this
still
podcast.
Couldn't get it. You had one job.
That's right. We had one job and we completely failed. We admit it. So if you were looking for us in February, you didn't miss us and we didn't forget to upload it. We just simply did not do it. But anyway, back to the kind of central thing. I don't know what I'm talking about. Back to the topic here. So we did part one of this kind of relationships topic where we're talking about the relationships between, and Lauren here was the one doing most of the talking about the relationships, but he was talking mainly from the point of a bass player, but we also talked about just the relationship between bass and drums and guitar and drums and just every piece of, or a lot of the pieces of the worship team. So if you missed us, go back and listen to it, to part one, and it's just called Relationships. And again, this is part two, but we left off talking about kind of when we're worshiping, kind of paying attention, following the leader, and that sort of thing. So let's pick up there, because I think a lot of the topics we're going to talk about in a few minutes are kind of, this is a good segue into it. So Lauren, you're back on the hot seat, or back in the hot seat now.
Right.
So take us through, kind of recap, if you can, or even since it's been a month, if you can kind of talk about, again, the worshiping, following your leader, paying attention, and then we'll kind of get into the next topic.
All right. So, sorry, just a second.
Sorry.
I'll cut that out.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, as worshipers up there on a stage, the congregation, basically, they can be looking to us to kind of exemplify worship for them. Like, what does worship look like?
Right.
For people that maybe they're coming in and this is all strange and new to them. That's one of the reasons we're up there. We're also there to lead them in worship to God and just kind of be out of the way.
Right.
But provide the music for what we do.
Yes.
So it's, and it's in this package that's traditionally a performance package, and so it's this fine line. And so you're worshiping, and at the same time you're paying attention to what you're doing,
right?
But you're not performing. So it's.
That's a gray line sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of people ride that line way
or just don't even bother
to one side or the other.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen plenty of people that are just like, no, we're just gonna go ahead and go perform.
So I know that we would, as Christ followers, we would love to be able to just completely let it all go and worship, and not have to pay attention to what we're playing. But we're also musicians, and we love playing, and that's why we're up there. So you have to figure out how far you as a person can go in worship while still paying attention to what you're doing, what the rest of the band is doing, what your leader is cueing, what the Holy Spirit is prompting.
Yep.
That hopefully you're being able to tap into at the same time that your leader is. And so when he decides to take the band somewhere, you already go, yeah, I felt that happening.
Right.
I knew that we were going to do that. And those are really awesome mornings or nights, whenever your service is. So yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about, I think, when we ended, was just being able to be in the moment, actually worship, but play your instrument and as a group as well.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us into the next section, I think, which is how to not take it too far, because I think you can be kind of tuned in all that stuff you were talking about, but then there's being excellent at what you're doing and staying kind of in the moment, following the leader, following the Holy Spirit, and then there's being a distraction in worship.
And we've talked about this a little bit in previous podcasts. We talked a little bit about it when we had Rudy here
Right.
talking about production.
Right.
And all the different things that go into that and how you enhance worship without distracting from it.
Right. Which can be rough.
Yeah.
But how do we, from the musician side, how do you do everything we've talked about and yet not become the thing in the mix or in the music that's raising its hand saying, look at me, look at me.
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with knowing your local DNA, knowing what your church is about, what the sound of your church is, and what the sound of your region is.
Okay.
Instead of just going, you know what? I absolutely love what Elevation Church is doing. I love what Gateway's doing. I love what Hillsong's doing, or Bethel, or whoever your favorite is, and just
whoever's relevant during this podcast you're listening to.
Trying to emulate exactly what they do,
right,
without taking into account what your congregation needs and who your congregation is.
Yeah.
And so, and who your players are. Who are your musicians? They're all, like we talked about earlier in part one. Everybody on your team is coming from a different place, from a different musical background, and adding those little flavors and everything in, whether they mean to or not.
Right.
And so, you kind of got to take that all into account and then figure out what that line for your congregation is. Like, I think we've talked before about Lincoln Brewster, how he's figured out that, yes, this is his style, and for his church, it really works for him to play these solos and intricate parts and kind of have that sort of band. Bands like Israel Houghton and a few others. They've got more of
that R&B soul thing,
gospel thing going on. Yeah, where you've got a lot more playing out of all the different instruments in more of a.
It's a little more sparkly.
Yeah.
A little more sparkly is what I call it.
But I'm willing to bet that actually works for their congregation, hopefully without being a distraction and without being kind of it's all about the band.
Yeah.
I'm not part of their congregation, so I don't know. One of the ways that we kind of go at this is we raise the excellence bar at our church really high. And it's started at a certain point years ago. It was always a focus of excellence in worship.
And can I say I'm sorry for having set that bar so high for you guys? Because when I came in and started playing with you guys as a guest guy, I just didn't. I'm kidding.
You were a favorite right away.
Kidding. Yeah, right. I'm kidding. Anyway, your point. I'm sorry. I had to say that too.
So anyway, from the very beginning, and I wasn't a part of the church from the very beginning, but these are the stories that I've been told, and this is across the board. It's just been what everybody says has been the deal. Yeah. So it's from the beginning, it's been excellence, and so over time, that bar just keeps getting raised and raised and raised and raised because of the DNA of our church.
Right.
To the point now where we have to have a training program to get people up to that level before they can play on the weekend team. Okay. Now, one thing that does is it ensures that there are very few chances for one person to derail the team. Okay. And so we actually can focus on what is the Holy Spirit doing right now in the room and personally and for that person right there. And where are we going as a team instead of just blindly following the page and just worshiping and just letting go. When you have one or more people on the team that, isn't up to that level where everyone else is, they will inevitably pull everyone down to that level, and everybody has to focus on the technical aspects of it to try to keep everything going.
I was going to ask, when you say level, just to clarify for listeners, we're not talking about spiritual maturity. Everyone hear that train? I just heard a train. There's a train going by.
Podcasting in Dixon.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, we're not talking about spiritual maturity necessarily. We're not talking about, although that has, I'm sure, some bearing on it. But we're talking about technical excellence on your instrument and execution.
Preparedness.
Right.
all of the different things that we talk about, just even the relationships between,
right,
one instrument and another. Are you paying attention to what you...
Understanding that. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure we were clear on what that meant.
Yeah.
Like what your guys' bar means. It's a musical both, and in fact, this goes right into our next point. But it's a knowledge of what we've already talked about, which is the interaction between instruments and just being able to play as a team member, as well as just being excellent at your actual instrument. Mm-hmm. And so, take us into when you say excellence and the bar being raised, blah blah blah, and obviously every church probably has a bar. It may not be the same. Obviously, it's not the same for every church, but in your case, you have a very high bar. I've seen it, and it is excellent. It can be a little intimidating, so we may want to talk about that a little bit too, because I think when we have people that come into a church that maybe have a musical gifting, or even maybe God's kind of raising that up in them, and they're looking to apply that gift somewhere, and they come into a church like yours that has this extremely high bar, maybe we can talk a little bit about how that's not exclusive in the way that I think some people get intimidated and go like, I could never play on this team.
Right.
And where there may be entry levels.
I had that experience, actually.
Did you?
Yes.
We'll talk a little about that then.
So when God called me away from your church, the one that I had been going to for a very long time.
Which I haven't forgiven yet, but I'm working on it. I'm kidding.
The thing that I never thought would happen, but when it comes from God, it's just that piece of understanding that he's got a plan. So, moved me to this mega church that was just everything that I thought was horrible with Christianity, because I didn't know, and all you see is just the televangelists on TV that have gone wrong and stuff. Anyway.
So everyone's hearing Lauren say he found the perfect church, and everyone that goes, no, I'm kidding.
Turns out that it's a very healthy church and all that.
Right.
Anyway, so when I went to my first service there, the band that was playing, again, like the bar was high, and I was just like, okay, I've been playing for, I don't know, I'd probably been playing for like 15 years at that point, or 20 years.
Okay.
And I went, I would never be able to play here. Like, I think, because I went to a service before God called me there. So at that point, I was just going to at that time, my girlfriend's church, now my wife. And I'm just going, I would never be able to play here. These guys are insane. And then later when I got called there, I was like, great, so I'll be in the congregation the whole time. And I'm a musician. I want to play, but I would never be able to do it. Ended up trying out and got on the team right away. It was just myself.
The bar was much lower than...
I was psyching myself out. I didn't think I was good enough, but apparently I was.
We all did, yes. No, you're
but there are people that don't make it through tryouts. And we've had different types of tryouts over the years. It's been a trial and error kind of process of like, how do we filter? How do we try to, in just a moment, figure out where somebody is at technically, spiritually, just everything?
Yeah. How do we take a snapshot of this?
Where do we put them? Because for a very long time, it was either the weekend team or nothing. I mean, there was a little bit of things like, the youth group or whatever, but there was really no place for people to go. So it was like, sorry, we can't use you.
Go get better and come back.
Which, people can get hurt over that, and some people can get bitter, and you just kind of got to walk through this with people. But
and that's the crux. And keep going. This is the crux of the excellence I'm talking about, because that's where you get into problems. You start talking about excellence in a musical team. People think you mean only, quote, good people can play on it and stuff like that.
Volunteer positions. Like, how can you get fired from a volunteer position?
Right.
No, it's really rough, and I'm not the guy in charge. So ultimately, that's not my call. In the limited authority that I have been given over the ministry that I'm helping, I do have to kind of make some of those calls, because I am over that part of our training program of kind of trying to build people up to the level where they can go back to tryouts and you're ready for weekend team now.
Right.
And so now I have to go, well, either we're seeing forward progress and this is helping, or maybe this is not where God has called you.
Right. Right.
Maybe he's given you this musical gift to share at home.
Yeah.
Or in other aspects. And that's a very hard conversation to have with people.
Yeah. And if I can chime in too, I think when we say excellence, I don't think it's ever unachievable. I think that sometimes people think, well, they hear the word excellence and it means a million different things to a million different people. But I think in this case, we're simply saying the person with the musical gift, or at least I guess we'll call it gifting. Some people I think don't have a gifting and think they do. But let's just say for the sake of argument, a person with a musical gift, all we're talking about is an environment where that person can be the best that God has created them to be, and a place that's encouraging and uplifting and will bring that person into the excellence that they can achieve. And I think for myself, and I know you guys in your church definitely have a much more of like you said, a broad training program, and like there's an entry level now where you can get in and it's not like daunting. Like, hey, I can play the drums. Where can I serve? And there's a place now where it's not like try out, fail, or try out good. It's like, come play, we'll train you up. Same thing with my church. God put it on my heart very early on I think that we achieve excellence, but I think that there's not for whatever reason, God put me in a place to be able to kind of try to bridge that gap where it's like, yes, there's an entry level, but I will train you up to the level that I think you can be, and I think that we can be as a team. So I don't want anyone listening to think excellence means exclusivity.
Well, and this is what I love seeing, because I am still involved in your ministries at your church and everything in the limited way that I can with time and everything. Sure. But I love seeing what you have there, because I think both are perfect for the venues.
Exactly.
I think God has set up
getting back to the DNA thing.
Yeah, God sets up leaders. And so I think through those leaders, he shows them what works for their congregation in their church at that point in time. And so you have a great program that works great for your church. Right. And if you had implemented the one that we have, it would not have worked. You would have no team.
Yeah.
And if we implemented yours, probably the same way.
Yeah,
it just
totally.
it would not work for what we have going. And so
but we have the same goal, which is that excellence.
Exactly.
And I think that's the important takeaway from this, at least for me, but hopefully anyone listening, is that excellence is always achievable. You simply have to be willing to wait. You have to be willing to let people make mistakes and build people up. It's I mean, it's really just a microcosm of what we're supposed to be doing as Christians in the church anyway. So I think that's excellent. And does that goes hand in hand without being a distraction, right? So we're talking about if you're brought up or in excellence, then you won't be a distraction. I mean, that's the whole point, right?
Right. Yeah. And so some of the ways that you can achieve this, if it doesn't come naturally, like you said, if somebody's just gifted and they're just automatically, or maybe they've already learned it and figured it all out. So I kind of broke it down in some of the ways that you can achieve this just through kind of technical step-by-step. Okay. And so it's basically know your stuff.
Gotcha.
And so the first one is know your personal instrument. So, I focused this paper that I wrote on bass players because that's what I am, but it kind of goes for everybody. So, I mean, the instrument that you own, the one that you play all the time, it's the one that you're going to be most familiar with. So you need to know it inside and out. Like for bass, I'm saying, can you play with your eyes closed, or do you have to look at every single placement of your fingers? Right. Do you know that if you want to go to an octave of that note that you're hitting, can you just automatically boom and then slide whoop, all the way up to the octave of that note without missing it, overshooting it, undershooting it, and slide back down and hit the root again? Or, do you know every placement of that A and all the low and high and everywhere on that neck? Or, what?
No, you mentioned something specific, which is the sliding to an octave on the same string, right? Yeah. And that funny story is our bass player, he would always do this jokingly at the end of songs, like after the service or whatever. He'd goof around and he'd always miss it, or he'd do something that it wouldn't work, right? And so I kept looking at him with weird looks, and he's like, oh, I'm just goofing around. I said, yeah, but if you're gonna do that, do it right. Right. And make it sound good. Yeah. Because that's totally a thing. Like, don't, it was specifically that, what you're talking about. And the reason I'm telling the story is because in recent weeks, not even that long ago. He did it a couple times in his service, and it sounded awesome. Like he went like he hit the notes and stuff. And I'm like, that's all. That's awesome. That added like a whole new tool to your bag. So he took what he thought was a joke, and me, hopefully anyway, kind of encouraging him in the fact that like that's a thing, dude. Like make that good. Don't just like goof around and think it's funny. And then applying it and putting it in context. So it was like a perfect example. I'm like, that just happened to me.
Yeah. I learned that from Tom Hamilton and Aerosmith.
Oh, baby. He's all
about
that.
A long time ago. So anyway, yeah, just those kind of things.
I digress.
Like, knowing all the notes that can be found, all the intervals. So if you know that you're on the 1 and you want to go to the 6,
right?
Do you want to go down or do you want to go up? You can play it in like 3 different places within reach without really even moving.
So you shouldn't have to think too hard to play your instrument, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Just practice all those things. And then, just like, what do all your knobs do?
Right. Yeah. That's true.
If you want a certain tone for a certain song or a section of a song, can you dial that in real quick? Or can you go to a different pickup for a reason?
If someone says, hey, that's, let's do X for the warm it up for this song. Does that even mean something to you? Or can you get a different tone?
Right.
If someone asks you to?
Yeah.
You know how to do that?
Yeah.
On your
if you're
amp?
doing sound check and the sound man says, hey, he wants you to tweak your tone before it gets to him so that he has a little more power to work on it, then, you're really mid-heavy. Can you cut that out or bump it up?
Which, by the way, when being excellent, that means you're willing to be humble enough to do something like that. Because a lot of players, if asked to change something about the way they play or what they're playing or their tone, insta butt hurt.
No, in my tone. I've worked on that.
Oh my gosh. So I would say part of the excellence package is being able to go like, you know what? Yeah. And then working with the sound person or whoever to do that and not be all butt hurt.
I work really closely with my sound guy trying to figure out what it is for that room because we have 3 campuses and I've played at each of them. And so I know what my bass does and sounds like in each of those rooms.
Right.
And so it's not just a set my tone and I'm done.
Right.
Also, so I have this bass that I built, and I made it to where the active electronics are powered through the 3rd pin of an XLR connection.
Nerd.
Yeah. And so
which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it's an active bass. I can also pull the volume pot to go passive.
Right.
Which cuts out all the active circuitry.
Yeah.
Changes the sound of the bass because it doesn't have all that active circuitry shaping the EQ. So now I have to know how to passively shape my EQ to still sound the way I want to sound.
Right.
And am I pulling that to go passive to sound a certain way? And then if I'm playing with my pedal board that I have that has all these pedals on it, it's going to give me a certain sound. If I don't have it with me that day, it's going to give me a certain sound. If I'm not powering my bass the way I normally do, it's going to give me a certain sound. And in different rooms and different amps and different speakers. So these are all things to pay attention every single time you're playing, every place you're playing, to what does my bass sound like in this room? And not only what does it sound like to me on stage, but what is it sounding like to the sound man?
And I'll jump in here for guitar players. All of that is true for the guitar as well, in that you need to be mindful of the environment you're playing in. I go directly to, the guitar tone itself is part of that, I think, but most of the time you're throwing a mic in front of it, so you're not paying as much attention to the room in the fact of in the tone area. But like if you are in a room and one day that's super dead and you can throw boatloads of reverb and delay on it and it doesn't really destroy anything, and then you go to a super live room the next day, you got to know that the second you start throwing the same amount of reverb, delay, whatever, time-based effects on your stuff, your front of house guys can be like, I got nothing because this room's real live and I can't, you just get lost. You're just a mush now. So you have to pay attention to your environment in different ways, depending on the instrument you play. Yeah,
I've come to the point where I have actually a 7-band graphic EQ, a bass EQ on my pedal board that I know what frequencies I'm going to boost or cut depending on what room I'm in.
Right.
Because of how my bass reacts to that room, because it's live or it's a bigger room or a smaller room. So
yeah, and I think a lot of this stuff comes with experience, and it's not one of those things that I think anyone should expect a new person to really grasp. But it's good to be aware of it.
And this isn't to say that the better you get, the more of this stuff you'll be using. you should, as a bass player, always be able to pick up a just standard.
Yeah. Someone hands you a P bass.
Yeah, P bass, plug into an amp, and go.
Right.
Like, you don't need all the bells and whistles. They're tools to help you achieve something.
Right.
And yeah, you can use them, but if you're a bass player that's worth anything, you should be able to pick up the standard equipment and just play it.
I agree 100%. A guitar player should, now, while the delays and the reverbs and the overdrive pedals and everything else we have on our boards are great, you should, I mean, I understand that I'm limiting myself here when I say this, but you should be able to plug a guitar into an amplifier and get a good tone.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to do that, then you shouldn't have a pedal board between you and your guitar,
Yeah.
or the guitar and the amp at all. Like, you should be able to plug into an amp and have it sound like a great guitar sound, and then worry about that stuff. And that goes for drums. You should know how to tune your drums, or at least what tuning does, or at least how to basically tune a drum. Know the room. Hey, hitting really, really hard in a dead room is going to be really, really loud, you know, and maybe in a bigger room you can hit harder. Just little things like that. There's a lot of things as whatever instrument you play, the touch of your instrument plays a huge role in this. So anyway,
right. So as well as knowing your personal instrument, you got to know your general instrument. So was it yesterday that we had the worship night at your church?
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew there was going to be minimal instrumentation that night,
right,
and more of kind of a acoustic feel,
right. Coffee house feel, yeah, whatever that means, yeah.
So I decided to bring my fretless bass, which I never bring out.
I was surprised.
Every once in a while I bring it out, and it's always like, well, that maybe wasn't the greatest idea, because I don't hardly ever bring it out.
But it got brought out and played last night.
One of the things I learned a long time ago is I have a tuner in line that's on all the time. I need to get a faster tracking one, though. My pitch black doesn't track as fast as
really?
the,
you said that, and I was like,
yeah,
that's so beyond my talent.
The Boss tuners track faster than the Korg.
Okay.
I need to get a faster one. Anyway, so
just for that bass.
I listen, to stay in tune, as well as watch my tuner to make sure that I'm right in there. But I knew that I'd have space to kind of play around with some slides and some just different things to kind of make it a little bit different that night.
Right.
And so I brought it. I also brought my main bass, and it was in the car.
I was going to ask you. I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, because you never know. And it's just, okay, this was a bad idea. I'm sorry.
Right.
But it ended up working out. So know your general instrument. Know what you can do to add to the team that night. If it's a different instrument than you normally play,
right,
or bring in a 5-string instead of 4-string, or vice versa, or adding a certain thing to your pedal board or not, or whatever. So
yeah. That's good.
Those are important too. Knowing your scales, modes, keys, and times. This is going to help you tremendously. Now, I've never been good at this. I've never been good at practicing on my own. I am the type of learner that I need a definite application to something in order to learn it and retain it and have a reason for it. And so I'm horrible about just sitting down and practicing a general thing that will, over time, make me better. And maybe there's a lot of you out there that have the same problem. But knowing your scales, knowing your modes, all your key signatures and your time signatures is going to make you a better member of any team. And just do it. Well,
it's one of those things too where you really can't go wrong, at least having the knowledge in your bag. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's very few times or ever, I should say, when I've played in worship music where I've had to pull out a Lydian mode. Mm-hmm. Like, it just doesn't happen. As much as it would be kind of cool, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like,
that's it. We're starting a new church, the Lydian Church.
That's right. It's the Joe Satriani Church of So I mean, there's certain things that you're just going to have in your bag, and it just makes you a better musician. I mean, knowing even what a mode is.
Well, I remember when I was first starting out, I was like, well, why do I need to know that there's an M by that? Like, why do I need to know that it's a minor chord? Because I'm just playing one note.
Oh, sure.
And then I figured out, because I can play another note that accents that's the third,
that's right,
or the 7 of that, and
which one should I play?
You can shape out the chord along with the rest of the band through fills or through grace notes or through leading tones or whatever that help out the song.
Right.
And so instead of just playing the root and everything and being really boring, this is where you start being an asset to the team.
And plus just relationships, musical like intervals, and the way, like you were talking about the 1 and the 6 and knowing those and just the relationship on your guitar or bass or we'll call it melodic instrument that actually can put chords together and things. Most drummers don't usually have to worry about that, but it'll be good to know. If you were a drummer, if someone says 6, you kind of know what's going on. But yeah, you don't hit your tom, then all of a sudden you're hitting the 6. Well, unless you're that good.
I love playing with Tim for that reason because he knows all the percussion and everything. So he plays the
guy's a rock star when it comes to.
So he knows all of the actual musical stuff.
Yeah, but anyway, it's good to know. I think the point is here. It's good to know, and I know, speaking for myself, I'm by no means a guy that has all that in the bag. It's not like I know all my modes. I know there's specific people out there that are listening to us that do.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Because I'm not great about this either. But I know that it's key, and I try to take in more and more over time.
Exactly. So. It's important, and we recognize the importance of it.
And I covered this a little bit earlier, but know your equipment. Yeah. So do you know how to even dial up your sound on any amp? And gain staging, and making sure that it doesn't clip, and all of that. Do you know how to set up all the equipment from scratch if you had to?
Right.
Can you troubleshoot it if something goes wrong?
Right.
Or do you have to wait for the sound man to come all the way up to the stage and fix
Guitar
something?
players, do you know how to place a microphone on your cab?
You should.
Do you know that you can move it and change the sound of your guitar? Do you hate the way your guitar sounds in your in-ears and you have a mic on your cab?
Yeah, how much easier is it when the sound man says, "Oh man, it's really muffled."
You go, hang on.
He now has to come all the way down to the stage and move it for you, and then go all the way back, and then listen to it and go, "No, that wasn't it either." Or you could just reach down and move it for him, and it's really quick. Okay, yeah, that was the difference we needed.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, no, I think it's totally important. Now, I'm going to kind of move us ahead here so we don't get super long. So we've covered kind of the practical of all of this. So we've talked about just recently the excellence. We've talked about the relationships between instruments and players, and that's all awesome. And you can apply a practical lesson to all of that. Like anyone listening, or even us, we can go to our teams and we can apply something we talked about. Not to say that what we're going to talk about next doesn't have a practical application, but it's not a hand on your instrument type practical application. So let's get into the spiritual side of things. Because obviously what we do is not only play an instrument like we were talking about.
Yeah, this is what sets us apart from garage bands, bar bands.
Exactly. So let's talk about what it is to be on the team as a Christian and not just a musician playing an instrument. So the first thing I think when we talk about the spiritual side of things is, of course, prayer. And just our walk with the Lord, I think, as far as our active participation in talking to Him and just keeping ourselves prayed up and that sort of thing. So, talk to me about that. What do you find? Because I know on your team, well, I'm not saying that our team doesn't focus on that. Your team likes prayer. We tend to go away from it. So, but talk to me about, in your experience, what that means.
Yeah. So just with my personality and who I am, I'm much more apt to go towards the technical, towards the application kinds of things, and it's harder for me to go towards the more of the spiritual disciplines. And so, whereas I know a lot about the equipment and I can set up a stage from scratch, one of our worship leaders, I totally envy her because, in a good way.
Not the sinful kind.
Yeah. Because while she lacks all of that, and I even confronted her recently. We had a nice little talk because she called a SM57 a karaoke mic, and I was like, no, it's a valued mic.
Wow.
And it just, no.
A 57 or 58?
57.
A karaoke mic?
Yeah, just totally down on it, and it just irked me. But to her, it was like, well, this is a crappy mic.
I think we need to have a separate podcast.
I know. Anyway, and I was talking with her about this while encouraging her about this other thing, and so it was kind of like a tear down build up that I didn't mean to do. But I'm not good with words. Hello, I'm on a podcast.
That's epic. By the way, you heard it here, folks.
Yeah. So anyway, while she lacks all of that kind of knowledge or appreciation for the equipment, maybe unless it's like a known, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
all of her life, she's spent in close relationship with God. Just always being able to go into the secret place, have her special time with God where she's worshiping, he's talking to her, she hears him all the time. She's just close with God in a way that I still don't do even after all these years. And so those are the things that I'm learning from her and from other people on the team is it's like, okay, yeah, like we would all probably say, yeah, I need to read more, I need to pray more, I need to spend more time with God. For some of these people, that's really not their life. Like if they spent a little time away, they would be like, my day is shot. I'm finished.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, like how do you get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the things that our leaders encourage in us is focus on these, and then all the rest will come. So
I'd even go as far as to say, over the years, I think, especially being a worship leader, I think that my shift has focused more on the spiritual side of things than maybe I would have thought it would have over the years. And I would go as far as to say, that the spiritual side of things is almost more should be more important than the technical side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's easily neglected. Because especially in larger churches such as yours, I think excellence seems to get tied into nice stuff.
Right.
And I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying it's really easy to see nice stuff as being part of the excellence package. And saying like you were saying, the mic thing. Like I think that her inexperience with even knowing what an SM57 was, and by no means am I saying that mic is the best mic in the world, but it has its applications.
Yeah.
And it's a good mic in the right application. But seeing that mic as something that's cheap and bad because she's always seen really nice things or whatever, I think tends to sort of show you the mindset of how it can get tweaked. So anyway, my point is that if you're in a place where maybe you haven't thought about your walk as a musician as being more important than the actual musicianship, and honestly, I think that if your walk is you get tighter and tighter with God, I honestly think your musicianship will probably be better anyway, anyway. But yeah, I think it's important to say that it shouldn't take back seat to, or it should be part of the excellence, I should say. It shouldn't take a back seat to what you call excellence. It should be part of your excellence package. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's to the point where it'll throw the team off more than you think.
Totally.
If something's going on in your life where you're not close with God and you're kind of pushing back because of something going on, or if you just haven't spent that time with Him, we've gotten to the point where we can kind of tell on our team, like, hey, something's kind of off. Or it'll just be those things where it's like we just can't push through and worship for some reason. It's kind of fallen dead. Like, what's going on? And so we really encourage our team to like make that a priority.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally legit. And I think the place of vulnerability that you have to be when you're worshiping and being, like we were talking about, that example of worship, it has to be a place that you go to regularly.
Yeah.
And not just...
You can't just pull it out on Sunday morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, a good example, in my case anyways, recently we've started... I mean, we've always prayed before service as a team and stuff, but we recently... I think you've been there for a few of these. Within the last however long, we've decided, we and a couple other teams actually decided, you know what, we're just going to start really going for it in the morning. And
that was awesome.
Yeah, and it's been... And I don't mean anything weird or crazy, but we really just focused on, as a group, praying and being really vulnerable with God and spending a half an hour or more in just prayer.
That was huge. Like, instead of just a 2-minute or a 5-minute, just kind of, okay, God, thank you for today. Help us through this next set as we go on stage, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, it's a half hour of intense prayer.
Yeah.
And praying for the congregation, praying for the city, praying for a revival and for God's work in our hearts and minds. And I can't tell you how much that's changed everything. Like, our pastor, he's a part of it. Our pastor is different. I mean, we have multiple people that are like, you're just not the same guy. Yeah. Like,
And it's not because he was bad or anything. It was just like, I think when you get in a room with other believers and everyone there is just like done emotionally and you're just going for it with God, and like no one cares about what they look like to other people, and you're praying honest, real prayers, and that place of vulnerability we're talking about, I think that lends itself to, we just take that on the platform and we just go like, let's just continue it out here. And a lot of times I start praying stuff, and there's anyway. So that place of vulnerability, you have to be used to going to. Otherwise, I think you're really doing yourself and the congregation and God, to be honest, a disservice by not knowing what that's like and being prayed up, and
Yeah, and for you people listening, I mean, do you pray with your team? Do you pray for your team? Do you pray for the congregation?
Right.
One of my old pastors used to say, if you're all prayed, or what was it? If you're always in the Word, you always have a word.
Okay.
And so, if you're constantly in your Bible, then you have God's Word in you. You're always going to have a word for somebody.
Yeah.
If you're always prayed up, then you don't have to backtrack before you take the current thing to God.
Right.
And it's like, okay, God, let me cover all the things that I've been meaning to talk with you about before we get to this thing that is pressing right now. Because, I know we haven't really been spending any time together. And,
right.
And also, if you know God's Word, then you start to notice things about certain songs. You're like, that verse is a little off. Like, maybe it's not heresy.
Right. It doesn't go all the way there. But
it's a little weird. Maybe we won't play that song.
Yeah, and in fact, we had a podcast about that, I think, where we talked about lyrical content.
Yeah.
But, I agree, and you touched on being in the Word, and I think that goes hand in hand with being in prayer. And we're not talking about you need to be, we are called to be constantly in prayer and constantly, pray without ceasing, stuff like this, but you can't do that alone. And I admit that one of my weakest areas is being in the Word consistently. And so I started taking baby steps. Like, I have an app that reminds me, or it doesn't even remind me, it just gives me a verse of the day, which is fine. It's a little thing.
Yep.
But I find that if that prompts me, then a lot of times I'll open the full chapter and I'll read the full chapter. Like the other day, Romans 8.
Yeah.
And this is before the worship thing, because I pulled it out there too, because God's really been pushing Romans 8 on me, whatever. But, it was one of those things where God, I think, he didn't need me to do anything, but I wouldn't have responded to his word had I not followed his prompting in the Word while I was reading it. So like if I wouldn't have gone into the Word, short of him, dropping a Bible on my head and performing some actual miraculous thing, then he wouldn't have been able to. We wouldn't have had that conversation, and he wouldn't have been able to say like, "This is my word for you." So, yeah, you got to be in the Word. So it's super important. You can't just pray and think you can get away with not ever reading the Bible.
Yeah. And so my last point would be support your leader. So this can go a whole lot of ways, but your leader is the one who's been called to lead your team, and so you need to support them in every way. Even if you don't agree with all their decisions, or it wouldn't be the way that you would do it if you were the one in charge, they're still the one leading, and you need to support them in that. And if there's an actual problem, then you need to just have a conversation with them and say, hey, I've got this thing. Let's just kind of talk it out, even if, at the end, we don't really come to like a
It's okay thing. To not agree with people.
At least it's out, and we've talked through it, and now we're good. But one of the best things you can do is always be early.
Sure. Yeah.
If the team's having to wait on you, or if you're not quite ready when the downbeat, when rehearsal starts or whatever, that's a huge drain on the whole team and everyone's time and everything. So just always be early.
I have this thing, and I don't always hit it. I don't want anyone to hear me say this and think that this is 100% me, because I definitely failed this. But I try to live in the first in, last out. And I think that's definitely a leadership thing. I try, and I've taught my kids this. I said, if you're leading things, you need to be first in and last out. And everyone has life that hits them, and you don't always. But I think to Lauren's point, everyone should probably live in that mindset, especially if you're on a worship team. But I think in anything you do, you should. I'm not saying necessarily be early and be a problem for people. Like if you're going to a dinner party, showing up early isn't always a great thing to do. But when you're in something that's like a support role, or extra time does nothing but help in that kind of situation, then first and last out.
If you have any sort of gear to set up, you definitely need to be early. If you're just a vocalist who comes and picks up a mic that's supplied for you, you obviously don't have to be as early as the guitar player.
That's right. If your rehearsal time is 7 p.m., you should be there at 6:30 or 6:45 minimum, and you should be setting up your stuff. Or in the morning, if 8 o'clock, 7:30 should be what you're aiming at, or 7:45, and that way you can get you can on downbeat you can start at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, one of the things we covered at our most recent team meeting was not being down on any group or artist and going, oh, well, I don't like them because their music is bad, or whatever that is, whatever group that is.
That, Lauren.
Oh, I know. Everyone does, and our leader said, I've probably even done this,
right.
and so he's saying most of the music that's out there, it's out there because somebody found value in it, and it's of some sort of excellence. Even if it's not a style or a genre that you would normally listen to, listening to it will give you a broader scope of just music in general and everything. And so just listen to all the different things, listen to the different worship albums that are out there, try to figure out which ones are, quote, good or bad, and go for the excellent ones and try to learn from them, and just keep expanding. And so in that way, building up your team,
right,
and supporting each other and not tearing others down. That's been a big one for us recently. So
that's awesome. Well, we have officially beaten that horse to death.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. No, I think this is really good. I look at all the stuff that we've covered on our podcast, and I mean, they're all little bits and pieces of the whole, but I think this one did a really good job of addressing specific things in certain areas. My hope is that people listening to this will apply it to whatever area of ministry, but specifically if you're in a music ministry, their specific instrument or whatever, and get some ideas. Because I think some of this stuff is subtle. It's not something you deal with every single time, or at least think about. So, yeah,
and like I said, originally this came from a paper that I was writing that was kind of meant to be a training log or workbook or something for teams that I still haven't finished. But that's why we've covered so much. So thanks for hanging in there, everybody.
It was good, though. And I have a requirement that the next time you say the phrase writing a paper, you have to be wearing glasses and perhaps be smoking a pipe. I'm just saying, you can't say that phrase, writing a paper. You sounded like all professor and stuff.
Well, yeah, I'm trying.
Because education. Yeah. So anyway, I echo Lauren's sentiment. Thank you for hanging in there with us. I think this was important stuff. And so we hope you apply it somewhere. But I have been Chris Davis.
I have been Lauren Levasseur.
And he did it well, I might add.
Better than I usually do.
But we thank you guys so much for hanging out with us and taking the time to listen to our podcasts. You have a good one, and we'll see you if all goes well. Ooh, special guest next podcast, right?
Are we bringing him in?
I believe we are.
We've been telling him he's coming in for a year.
Yeah, a year?
He told me that it's been a year.
I don't think we've been telling him that. I think he's been telling himself that. But anyway, we are going to have a special guest for the next podcast in April. And so we want you to tune in there because it should be interesting. He's a cool dude, and he has a lot of cool perspectives on things. So I think it'll be fun. But yeah, tune in for that because the special guest ones are always fun.
Yeah.
All
right.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next time.